Alright, welcome back. This is Board Game Officer. Alright, so today we're going to go through the bosses of Tiny Epic Dungeon. Now, I did title this, the easiest and the hardest. I think there are some harder that some are easier, but a lot of these are actually going to depend just on who your characters are and how you build them up. Right? If you have all melee versus all range versus all magic versus one, right? If you got to make sure some of these are going to be a little bit harder than others depending on your party. But I think there's a few that are just in general harder and just in general easier. So we're going to go through them all. So here we've got these 6 right here. These are going to be from the base game. We've got these 2 that come into play with the Stories expansion. And then we have these 2 here that come in during the Potions and Perils expansion. So I kind of just separate them out here first so we can kind of see what comes in what. So if you don't have anything, you kind of know which ones to ignore, right? I've kind of been playing with all of them for a while, so I actually had to look up which ones went with which one because I hadn't played for so long. It does say in the top left-hand corner what expansion they're from or if they're from the base game, but I did have to look at that because I didn't actually know. So we're going to go through them by expansion or base game. And which one's hardest, we'll kind of talk about each one, what each one does, and then we'll kind of go at least, I'm not going to tier them like from 1 to, 10, but I'm going to at least say like, hey, this one's by far the hardest, so this one's by far the easiest. That way, maybe you can, if you're having a hard time winning the game, you could cheat a little bit and say, hey, I know if I'm going to battle this one because he's easiest, and if I tailor my heroes this way, it's going to make it easier, right? A little bit of cheating, obviously. But, if you're having a hard time winning, sometimes maybe you have to do that just to kind of get that win under your belt so you know how to do it as you go on, right? I might get some hate comments for that, but that's okay. That's how I feel. Sometimes if you're having a hard time, you just got to give yourself a little bit of a boost just to understand how the whole game plays so you know how to play better next time. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in to these guys here. All right, so these ones we have the base game enemies here, or bosses, sorry. So we first have the dragon. So I guess we'll name off. We got the dragon, we got the Gorgon, the Goblin King, the Hydra, the Pharaoh, and the Seer. So first off, we'll go through the dragon here. So the dragon only has one altar that you have to get him on. However, he does have 8 defense. He has the highest defense, so he is going to be hard just because of the high defense, right? You're only going to be able to nip at him, but you only need to get one altar on him. Then for a melee attack, he's going to add 4 to the damage. For a range attack, he's going to add 3. And for magic, he's only going to take away 2 focus. Rather than hurting you, he'll just take 2 focus away from you. When he activates, he's going to move, and everyone within 4 rooms is going to take 2 damage. That's a pretty high range. Anyone within 4 rooms. 2 damage. If you roll the torch down, everyone within 1 range is going to take 2 damage, right? So he's got a lot of defense, and he's going to be hurting almost everyone every single turn. Now, for his positions here, he's actually going to enter right here where these black arrows are at. And if you go here, you're going to get a -2 health. If you end your movement here, +2 focus, -1 health. You get a +2 to your strength roll, or +2 to your agility roll, or +3 to any roll. As you can see, that one's usually they always have the best one, the furthest away from the entrance, right? So it's going to take you a couple more movements to get there, is the thought process at least. Makes sense. So I would say he's probably medium hard, right? He's got a high defense, which makes it harder. Yeah, maybe medium hard, I would say. Because he's got that high defense, but he only needs 1 altar, which can make a huge difference. Meaning, depending on how you've built your dungeon, you might be able to make it back here to do some more damage in the layer. However, if it's far away, it might take more. But right, if you only have 1, it might be beneficial to actually pull him back to the layer. Maybe, depending on who you have and who your characters are. But there we have the dragon. Next up, we got the Gorgon. So she as well only needs 1 altar. She's got 2 movement and 6 defense. So that's 2 less. That's actually quite a bit less. She's got +4 to a melee attack, +3 to a range attack, and +2 to a magic. When she activates, she's going to move, and everyone within 3 range is going to do 2 damage. And if you get the torch, roll the torch down on the die, everyone within 3 rooms is going to lose 3 health, and she gains 1 health. So she's going to be trying to heal herself. Now, you enter the layer here, and these first 2 spots, you're actually going to take 1 dice away from your roll. So if you're rolling 3 normally, you're only going to roll 2 if you land here, or end your turn here. Here, you're going to add 2 to your strength, +2 focus, add 2 to your intelligence roll, or add 2 to your focus roll. or to your agility roll. So as you can see, she's actually a little bit easier, right? She does heal, which can make it hard, but she only does that if you roll a torch down. So other than that, like outside the dungeon, outside from rolling that torch track, she's actually doing less than the dragon and has less defense than the dragon, but still only one altar that she needs. So she's a little bit on the easier side compared to the dragon. Next up, we have the Goblin King. So he also only needs one, and his health, and it's all the way down here. So you could get him almost dead before you have to get him onto that altar. But he only moves one, and he has a defense of 6. Once again, that's pretty low for the bosses. And then he's got a +4 to the melee, +2 to the range, +1 to the magic. Now, this is where he gets pretty tough. Every time he activates, he's going to spawn a goblin to the entrance and add 2 health every time he activates. So that means almost every other turn on that initiative track, on that torch track, it's almost every other turn that he's activating. So he's healing 2 almost every other turn. If you roll a torch track down, the goblins, according to where the goblins are at, everyone within 2 rooms is going to take 1 damage. Meaning, he could be in his lair, but if someone is outside his lair and there's a goblin next to him, he's going to get hurt. So instead of in the range of him, it's actually in the range of the goblins. So he not only is he spawning out goblins, if you get a torch strike down, all goblins are going to do that. So if you're surrounded by 3 goblins, you're going to get hurt for 3, which is pretty intense just for a torch down track, because then he's still attacking next time around and stuff, right? So usually that's not a good thing. Here in his lair, you're going to enter right here, and these first 2 spots here is if you end your movement there, you're spawning another goblin into the entrance, which you could get overwhelmed with goblins way too easy with this guy. He is a Goblin King, so it makes sense thematically, but it gets pretty intense. If you end your movement here, you get +1 focus. Here, +1 focus. Here, you get +1 to any die roll. And here, +2 for any dice roll. So he is definitely going to be one of the hardest, mainly because of those goblins. You have to have someone out there controlling the goblins, meaning you can't just be both attacking the boss and hoping that those goblins don't get to you, because he's spawning in more and more. So if you don't do anything about him, you're going to lose just because that 5th goblin is going to spawn. So you have to have one hero almost dedicated just to taking out those goblins almost every other turn, and a few spawn on the torch track anyways. So you've got to have someone out there controlling all those goblins and more people attacking the Goblin King himself. So I would say maybe if you have 3 or 4 people, it might be a little bit easier, right? Because you still could have 2 people attacking the Goblin King and 1 person out there controlling the goblins. I usually play with 2 players, so only having 1 player attacking the Goblin King and the other one doing that, that makes it pretty tough, especially when he's healing every other turn. So you might do 6 damage, but then he's going to heal 2. And then hopefully you do another 4 or 6, or because he's just going to heal another 2 next time he activates, right? Especially when he gets down to the last 3 turns where he activates after every turn. He's going to get pretty hard. He's a pretty tough one. Next up is we have the Hydra. This is another hard one because there are 3 altars. Now, once again, in higher player counts, that might be a little bit easier because you're going to have more altars out there because you've fought more minions. Once again, I usually play at 2 players. That means we have to get into every single one that's out there. So we try our best to build the dungeon right? We're trying to do our best to get those minions spawned as close as we can to the boss layer. But sometimes that doesn't always happen because it's not a perfect game, right? We can't predict exactly what's going to happen. So if you got to get into all 3 and 1 minion room is all the way up here and the layers room down here, that's going to make him really hard because you've got to get him all the way across the board while trying to attack him. And so that's probably one of the hardest things about the Hydra, is just that you have to get into 3 altar rooms. So he's got 2 movements and 6 defense once again, so not too bad defense. +4 to melee, +2 to range, and +1 to magic. When he activates, he's going to move, and anybody within 1 room, he's going to hurt for 2, which range isn't too bad versus the other ones we've already seen. But every time you roll a torch down, he's going to add 2 health again. Once again, at least it's just when you roll a torch track down, so it might not happen, or it might happen a lot, depending on how you roll, right? And then for the layer here, the first one here is you're going to get a -2 no matter what roll you make, you're going to get a -2. If you land here, you're going to -1 health. If you land here, if you end your movement here, you will get a whole nother movement, however many movement you have. So that could actually make it pretty nice. However, as you can see, the 2 after that is -1 health. So you have to get to that one, and hopefully you have at least 3 movement so you could get to this, which gives you max health and max focus, which that could be a lifesaver if you could get in that far. So that's actually pretty cool. If you've watched my how to win every time video, it makes me sad that I don't use this very often, because a lot of these are really cool. It can be really helpful, but a lot of times it's just a lot of time wasters to get him there and back. It's just too much, especially like him, to get him to all 3 and then try to get him back to the lair. Like, that's just going to waste a lot of time. And so I don't know how often it's going to happen, but you could get some good benefits if you do make it happen. So maybe it might be beneficial, but you definitely have to kind of take your time to do it. So that's a Hydra. Just those 3 altar points. He's the only one out of all the bosses that has 3 altar points. So he's one that you got to look out for if you're only playing with 2 players, because then you have to get all 3 of them. Next up is we have the Pharaoh. So he only has 2 altars versus the Hydra at least. He's got 2 movement and 7 defense, and +3 to melee, +2 to magic, and a -2 focus to magic. When he activates, he's going to move, and everyone within 2 is going to do 2 damage. That's pretty average for the bosses here. However, if you get a torch down track, you're going to lose, everyone within 3 rooms is going to lose 3 focus or lose a magic. Once again, if you don't have magic, that means you have to lose the focus. So that could be a good thing and a bad thing, right? If you have a magic spell that you don't like, right, take it. Like, throw it away, trash it, you're not using it anyways. That's why it's always smart to always take the equipment, even if you don't need it, and if the other person doesn't need it, take it, because you might have to discard it for someone, right? And having something to be able to trash can be helpful, as in this case. Now, when you enter the dungeon over here, you're going to -2 focus, -1 focus, +2 to intelligence roll, +2 to your agility roll, +2 to your strength roll, and +2 focus. So once again, it just kind of depends on who you are, of where you want to land on that space, right? His is pretty simple in that way. Once again, he's probably pretty middle ground here. He does have 2 and he does have 7, so he's not as bad as the dragon with 8, but it's not as good as with 6. So he's kind of that middle ground. And last out of the boss or base game is the Seer. So once again, he's got 2, but his second one isn't until that last one. That means if you could at least get him to that first one, you could hurt him all the way down to just a couple damage left, which could be really helpful. So he's a little bit easier in that way. And he's a little bit easier because he's only got 6 defense, which that's nice. And then 3 movement. And then here's our first one that actually has higher for range. So he's going to hurt range people a little bit more back. But he's got a +3 to melee, then a +4 for range, and a -3 for magic. So other than melee, he's a lot harder for range and magic than we've seen so far. When he activates, everyone within, he's going to move, and all heroes within 1 room is going to -2 health and -1 focus. And then if a torch track goes down, that's the enemy. That's just the symbol for the enemy. It means the enemy is going to go back to his lair and heal for 2. So this one could be a pain, right? If you're rolling a torch track, right? If you finally get him to that first one there, and you just got to get 2 more spaces to get up that next one, and then you roll a torch down and he goes all the way back to the lair. And now you got to fish him all the way back out to there. So, meaning this is a nice thing because it's at the very end, but it's also not a nice thing because if this keeps happening before you could get him to that second one, right, it's going to be a little bit more painful. So that's a little different. That's kind of fun. You're going to enter into the layer here, -3 focus, then -2, +1 focus, +1 to any die roll, +1 focus, and +2 to any die roll. So that's the Seer. Once again, he's probably about a little bit lower on the middle end, but a little bit, just depending, it's just that torch down. Outside of that, he's not too bad. He does hurt back a little bit more, but you could hurt him a little bit more, right? So he's kind of that middle ground area, maybe a little bit on the lower middle ground. Once again, all of these thoughts here are 100% dependent on who you actually have, right? If you have all melee people, he's going to be a lot easier. If you have ranged and magic people, he may be a little harder than I'm saying, right? So let's take all this with a grain of salt. But that is all of our base game. Now let's get into the Stories expansion. All right, so here we have the 2 from the Stories expansion, the Mind Lasher and then Tinkerer. So we'll go over the Mind Lasher first. So he's actually pretty interesting because, as you can see, he only has one, but it's at the very, very end. That might be actually beneficial because this is one that you might actually stay in the room, because you could jump in the room and hurt him a lot and then move him out. Okay, because you could hurt him all the way down to just a couple damage. So he may be beneficial in that way. But so he's got 1 movement and 7 defense, which is that middle ground defense. +4 to melee, +3 to range, and -2 health to magic. That could be a little devastating. When he activates, he's going to move in everyone within 4 rooms, which is a large range, a -1 health and -2 focus. As you can see, he's going to be pretty detrimental to magic attacks. For torch track down, everyone within 2 range, all heroes are going to move to the entrance. Might be a little helpful, right? Because the entrance is a altar spot. So that could be beneficial. But if you're trying to attack him in the lair, then that's not beneficial, right? So I like that kind of mixture where that kind of make it better to attack him at there, but he might send you all the way back so you can attack him in his lair, right? Kind of a cool little play there. You're going to enter here for -2 focus, -2 focus, +1 focus, +2 to the strength roll, +2 to the agility roll, and +3 to any roll. All right, so you can do some pretty good damage if you get all the way into the layer there. You just hope you don't roll the torch down, because then you're going all the way in, you got to move all the way back in, and you could be leaving someone here vulnerable. But as you can tell, he's pretty harder against the magic people, just because of that -2 health and that -2 focus. That could be pretty hard. However, Mind Lasher, I would say kind of middle road there. Now the Tinkerer. We see that he's got 2 altar spots there. He's got a movement of 4 and then a defensive 7. He's got a +5 to melee, so that's pretty high against melee. +3 against range and +1 against magic. When he activates, he's going to move in everyone just within his room, right? So he's got 0 range, but he's going to attack you for 4 health, which a couple of the heroes, that's like all but 1 health. So that could be pretty detrimental. And then if you roll the torch down track, all heroes are either going to lose 2 health or lose 4 focus. Once again, that's a pretty hard hit. That's pretty devastating. Could be pretty darn devastating. You're going to enter into the layer here, and if these first 2 spots here, you're going to take the torch track down 1, which could make him activate, which could hurt you, right? So you got to make sure you don't land on one of those. And then you got a +2 focus, +1 focus, +2 focus, and +2 to 1 dice roll. That's actually pretty cool. And then +3 focus and +3 to any dice roll. So those 2 are actually kind of different than any others, and that's actually kind of cool. And it's actually not too far away from that entrance to the layer there. Once again, I think he's probably a little bit on the harder side. They do try to caveat that with these 2 spots, I think, because those are the strongest spots that we've seen so far. But he hits really hard on all aspects. However, he doesn't have any range, at least. Unless he does that static fill, then he does all heroes, right? So he's probably a little bit on the harder side. But those are our 2 stories expansions. We got 2 left for the Potions of Perils expansion. All right, so here we have the 2 from this Potions of Perils expansion. We've got the Lich and the Demon Lord. So we'll look at the Lich here. So Lich got 2. They're a little bit lower at the lower end. We got 2 movement and 7 defense. Then we got +4 to melee, +2 to range, -2 focus to magic. Pretty average for what we've seen so far. When he activates, he's going to move, and everybody within 2 rooms, he's going to still 2 or take away 2 focus and heal 1. See, here we have another one that's going to heal every time they activate, which could be almost every other turn. So a little sketchy there. And then if you roll the torch down, everyone within 1 room has to get rid of an equipment or a spell. Once again, if you don't have anything that you could discard without getting hurt too bad, he's going to be a tough one, right? Because as long as you don't roll any torch down, then you're fine. But right, so that could hurt pretty bad. Entrance is right here. You're going to minus a die for the first 2 spots. Then you're going to +1 focus, +1 to any die roll, plus another focus, and +2 to any die roll. Right, so he's going to be probably middle road again. The biggest thing is that he heals, but he only heals 1 at least, versus like the Goblin King that heals 2 every time he activates. But then he also, this is just dangerous, because that means if you keep rolling that torch down track, you're just getting weaker and weaker, and it's getting harder and harder to kill him. So he could be pretty hard with that, but I would say he's probably middle ground still. And the last one we have here is the Demon Lord. So he's only got 1 altar spot that's about just a little bit lower than half, so that's not too bad. 2 movement, 6 defense, which is the lower end for the bosses. but he's got +5 to melee, +2 to range, and +3 to magic. When he activates, he's going to move, and everybody within 2 range is going to get 2 damage and -1 health, focus. And when you get the torch track down, once again, everyone within 1 range is going to get rid of any equipment. So both of these ones are going to make you get rid of something, which once again can be devastating. I mean, once again, it's just the luck of the dice that you're rolling. But if you're not lucky with it, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt bad. You're going to end up having nothing by the end, right? If you keep rolling this. So he can be pretty tough. We enter here. We got -1 health -2 health, +1 focus, +1 to your die roll. Then we got -1 focus, +1 focus, and +2 to any die roll. So once again, he's probably a little bit, he can hit him a little bit easier, but he is taking away your equipment, your health, and focus, and he's doing a lot more for both magic and melee, right? So he's going to hit a little bit harder. Definitely range is going to be your best because that's pretty low for the range. So once again, he's kind of middle ground there, right? Like I said, it's hard to rate all these because they are kind of have their ups and downs. They're pretty ground for all of them. There's just a couple that are much harder than others, I think. All right, so that's all of the heroes. Let's look at all of them one more time. We'll kind of look at which ones I think are the hardest out of all of them and which one I would maybe start with if you're having a harder time winning. All right, so here we have all of them again. I haven't separated out still the base. We've got the Stories expansion and the Potions and Perils expansion here. So we have all of them here. I don't know if you're keeping track as I was talking about them, but I think the number 1 hardest one is going to be the Goblin King. That one is, I think, with him spawning the goblin and healing too. So if you only focus on him, you're going to get overran by goblins. If you try to ignore the goblins, or if you try to ignore him a little bit and attack more goblins on a turn, he's just going to heal, right? If you spend 2 or 3 turns attacking the goblins to get them back down, now he's healed up everything that you've already attacked him for, right? So it's this dance back and forth. If you're going to play him, you've got to play with someone like Zazili or a magic person that could kill more than one goblin. Right, with Zazili, I think that's why Zazili's a little broken. Or no, not Zazili. Well, Zazili's good too because he's giving you focus back. But Clotho. If you're playing Clotho, I think you'll be able to kill the Goblin King pretty good. Right, because Clotho can attack 4 squares and everyone do 1 damage pretty darn easy. Right, so you could spend a couple turns doing this, both of you attacking the Goblin King, and then Clotho go up. You know, there might be 3 goblins now. So you just have Clotho go up, kill all 3 goblins, and then come back down and keep attacking, right? So if you have someone like Clotho that could kill multiple goblins really easy, that makes him a little bit easier. But if you just got melee and all your characters can only attack once, and you can't attack more than one person, and he's spawning a goblin, and then the torch strike spawns a goblin, and then he spawns a goblin again, right? In 3 turns, you've just spawned 3 goblins. How are you supposed to take care of those and him? And he's healing, right? So he's definitely, I think, the hardest one out of all of them. And he's a base game boss. So he's probably the hardest. I think the next 2 hardest are going to be the Hydra, just because of the 3. I mean, if you're playing with 4, it might not be as bad because you've got more spaces or more altars for him to go on. But with 2 players, you get him on 2. I hope you built the dungeon right, right? Or else you're going to be chasing him all over the place. And I think these 2 are tied for the hardest. The Tinker, because he's got pretty good defense and he's hitting hard, right? That's kind of like the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord, they both hit pretty hard, but they also he's got 7. At least the Demon Lord only has 6 defense. The Tinker still has 7 defense and he's hitting pretty darn hard. You just got to make sure to stay out of his range, out of his area. But if you're all melee, there's only so much you could do to not get hit, right? I think there's only one in here that I would say was the easiest. And that's definitely the Gorgon. She's the easiest because she's only got 1 altar. She's only got 6 defense. And she's only hurting for 2 if she attacks you. I mean, it is range 3, but it's only for 2, right? And these, the +4, +3, and +2, they're pretty average for everything else. They're not higher. If you're in the dungeon, you can go to any space no matter what you're rolling. You can get added damage there, right? So I feel like she's definitely going to be the easiest, especially with the 1 altar and the 6 defense, and she doesn't hit hard. So I think if you're having a hard time winning and you just want to find an easy boss, because by the time you get to the boss, you're probably almost dead anyways, the Gorgon's probably going to be your best bet. Now, once again, take that with a grain of salt, because depending on your characters and your character build, one might be easier than another, right? I'm really trying to be as general as I can, even though that this game is not general at all, right? It's going to be totally different depending on who you play with and what equipment you got, right? You could play with the same person 2 times in a row and have a totally different build just because of what loot you found, right? Which is why I love the game, which makes this a little bit harder to say which boss is hardest because it just depends on who you have. So take that all with a grain of salt. There you have all the bosses with all the expansions. Please let me know what bosses you love to face against because you know they're going to be easier. Or if you have any of them that you like absolutely hate, like, nope, not playing him, let's pick a different boss because I don't want him, right? Which ones are the really hardest that you just don't even like? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching.